Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and welcome to another Ramble with the Yarn. So this is just for those of you who are coming across this for the first time. Each Sunday evening, I just sit down and crochet and talk to you for a little while about what I've been reading and the films that I've been watching, other bookish stuff. And without further ado, let's jump right into the bookish stuff. So, let me set this down. So I'm still reading The Western Wind by Samantha Harvey, and I'm getting close to being half done with this now. I'm going to shoot for having it done by next Sunday's Ramble, so that I can just spend the first few days of March just diving right into my mammoth for March of the Mammoths. But yeah, I mean, during the work week this week, I barely read anything in this. I read I don't know, maybe 60 pages, something like that, this weekend. It's good, but I'm having some difficulty with this, and we'll see how well I can articulate that. So the book is told in reverse, right? So, what's that, Memento, that old Christopher Nolan movie? It begins on Shrove Tuesday, if memory serves, and then works its way back through 4 days. And the novel begins with the discovery of a body. Somebody who's gone missing from the village, has been presumed dead, and is found in the river. So there's the village priest, the dean, the guy who's kind of overseeing the district or what have you of churches, is in town and is convinced that there's been a murder, that it wasn't an accidental death, and wants the priest to accuse somebody. Wants the priest even to violate the seal of confession. I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not sure how to word that. But essentially, it's to use people's confessions against them, if need be. And the problem I'm having with the book, and it's a minor problem, I suppose, is that I'm having some difficulty keeping the character straight, like who is who. And I think the reason is that when the characters are introduced to us in the first chapter, they're not proper introductions, right? So, for instance, the miller, I think the only time we see him in the first chapter is when he's observed kind of, walking around awkwardly in his shoes, because we're led to believe that he's got stones in his shoes as a kind of penance. And that's all. That's it, right? And then, and so it's not a strong enough impression, I suppose, to keep the character in one's memory, so that when one encounters that character again in the second chapter, it's not until the priest gives him the stones in the shoes, not gives them to him, but gives him as a kind of sentence, as a penance, the stones in the shoes, that we realize who that is, because we can't remember his name necessarily. So I'm finding myself flipping back through the pages trying to figure out, okay, is this person, that person, etc., etc., and I shouldn't have to be doing that in a book. So again, I was really curious to see how the structure came into play in the unfolding of this narrative, because it seemed really novel and it seemed really interesting just from the table of contents, and it is, but I'm not sure how conducive it is to the telling of the story. The jury is still out on that. It's a solid, I'd say, 3.5 stars at this point. It could dip down to 3 depending on how it ends, and it could bump up to 4 depending on how it ends, but also if I stop having this problem, right? If it starts to make more sense that it's making, why she structured the story in this way. So anyhow, The Western Wind. Hope to have it finished by next weekend, and I will deliver my my verdict on it then. Now, before we get on to the movies, I thought we would do a kind of impromptu TBR. TBR videos are not something I tend to do on this channel. I think I've done a couple of them in the past. And they're not even really something that I do just for myself, right, as a kind of roadmap for the year. I've tried it in the past, and they're difficult for me to stick to. They tend to be. But it occurred to me the other day that between So the book spin thing that Rick McDonnell kind of initiated, and my book club selections, the buddy reads that I have planned, the events coming up, etc., etc. I kind of have most of the year mapped out already, which is a little bit weird for me. But actually, in looking at the year as it's mapped out, I realize I'm going to have to kind of curtail my movie watching a little bit, and make a real concerted effort to try to overcome or to remedy this deficit in my powers of concentration and my attention span that the pandemic has left me with this last year. It's a lot better now than it was, right? Last March, April, May. It's a whole lot better now than it was then, but it's still nowhere near as good as it could be. And so I need to really just kind of focus. And so for the foreseeable future, I'm going to do everything I can to just limit myself to 3 movies per week. And that should, I think, give me enough time and enough kind of mental space to tackle all these books. But so in February, right, which we're in now, you guys know I'm reading The Western Wind, and hope to have it finished by next weekend. And I'll probably also try to start here in the next week, Daughters of the North by Sarah Hall, which is my BookTube Spin book and is technically supposed to be read before the end of March. And then March is going to be sucked up with Red Comet, the Sylvia Plath biography, which I'll be reading for March of the Mammoths. And then in April, my next book club book will be Serena by Ron Rash. And I'm also in April going to be reading, for the first time for me, I'm going to be reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier with Juan from Just One Reader. And he and I, it's going to be an entry in my Page and Screen series. The first one of those was The Best Intentions. Lukash and I read that novel and watched that film together and did a Zoom video on it. And Juan and I will attempt to do the same thing. So we're going to read Rebecca together and watch the Hitchcock film. And then May is going to be Maybe Midrash, the second year of Maybe Midrash. I know some of you have been really anxious that event continue, that readathon continue. And it's going to. I'll be reaching out to my co-hosts to find out if they're interested again in being co-hosts here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And for May, I'm going to be reading Inspired by Rachel Held Evans, and it's going to be my work of nonfiction for Maybe Midrash. And then I'm going to be reading Neil Griffiths' novel, As a God Might Be. I'm also going to be doing a buddy read of the new Marilynne Robinson that month, Jack, with my friend Mark, who used to have a channel here on BookTube called Words Everywhere. And then in June, my book club's going to be reading Hamnet, which I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about, so I'm really excited for that. And then in July, I'm going to be doing a buddy read with Jack from the Rambling Raconteur. We're going to read Far Tortuga by Peter Matthiessen. And then in August, I'll be reading The Fifth Season with my book club by N.K. Jemison. And then Lukash, Lukash from A Cruel Reader's Thesis, Lukash and I are going to read Zona by Geoff Dyer, which is his kind of meditation on Tarkovsky's film Stalker. So we're going to watch Stalker, and we're going to read Zona together, and then make a Zoom video for you guys in August. And then, of course, in September, it is Shake-tember, formerly known as Shake-tube. And so it's just going to be, all Shakespeare all month long. I have no idea what I'm going to be reading yet, but that's going to be exciting as always. And then in October, I'm going to be reading for my book club White is for Witching, which is, I think her name is Helen Oyeyemi. I may be wrong on that, so don't quote me there. And then in November, I'm going to be doing a buddy read with Lukash of Unquiet, which is by, I think her name is Lynn Ullman. She's the daughter of Liv Ullman and Ingmar Bergman. And then sometime between November and December, I'm going to read the book I was supposed to read this last December, but didn't manage to get to, and that is Winter's Tale by Mark Halperin. So, it feels ambitious to me, but it's also, it tallies out at lower than what I set my Goodreads goal as. So, who knows? I mean, if this ends up going well, and if I get to all of these things, maybe I'll kind of build some momentum, get on a roll, and read even a few more books in there. That would be nice. That would be really cool. But anyhow, so that's the plan, is to watch 3 movies a week is all, and give myself 4 nights a week where I'm not watching anything, and I can just devote myself to reading. And I'll read a little bit on the nights where I'm watching films too. But and it's going to be really helpful between now and Easter, given the fact that I'm not going to be drinking as well. So I won't have to worry about 2 or 3 drinks in the evening making me sleepy and making it difficult for me to concentrate. So that'll be really good, particularly for Red Comet. But anyhow, so that's the plan. If you've read any of those books, don't spoil anything, of course, in the comments. But if you've read any of them and have opinions on them, do let me know. It's going to be, hopefully, a better reading year than it was last year. But now let's get to the films. So I watched 4 films this last week. The 40-Year-Old Version, directed by Rada Blank, which was... I think it's Rada Blank's debut feature. We watched it in our Wednesday night film club, and it was great fun. It was really, really funny, really humorous, really, really wise, I think, about aging. And it's fascinating because on one level it seems to be principally about race, right? Particularly race. In relation to this kind of upper crust, pretentious world of playwrights and this scene of kind of off Broadway in New York and what have you, but it's about so much more than that, right? On some level, it'd be enough if it were about that. There's enough material there, and the movie mines that material really, really well. But it's also very much about aging, about what it's like to get older. Right, hence the title, The 40-Year-Old Version, and about how our bodies break down and we lose our confidence, and our opportunities seem to be more elusive than they used to be. So that's a good film. It's a really, really good film. It's gotten a tiny bit of Academy Awards buzz. I don't think it's going to get nominated for any Oscars, unfortunately. But yeah, it's worth checking out, and that is on Netflix, if I remember correctly. And then the highlight of the week was Stranger Than Fiction, Mark Forster's film, starring Will Ferrell and Dustin Hoffman and Emma Thompson and Queen Latifah, I think it is. And that's a rewatch. Kelly and I saw that in the cinema when it first came out, and it was a 10 out of 10 when I first saw it. I think it's one of the great screenplays, just remarkably good. And watching it again was. Just A, it was a breath of fresh air, but B, it's so wonderful to be reminded of just how good an actor Will Ferrell actually is, right? He tends to, people tend to kind of pigeonhole him as this specific kind of comedic actor, right? Just this particular kind of shtick. And but he's got so much more range than that. And he's really, really gifted in specific roles. He's kind of like Jim Carrey in that way, right? So Jim Carrey, people, Ace Ventura, The Mask, but Jim Carrey did Man on the Moon, and he did The Truman Show, and he did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And Jim Carrey is very similar to Will Ferrell, in that both of them are really, really gifted at doing these kind of offbeat, dramatic roles that are kind of studded with these moments of comedy. And Stranger Than Fiction is just, man, it is so damn good. It's so damn good. And I can't remember which platform that was on, but it's either on Hulu or Netflix. So if you haven't seen that, definitely look for it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a work of genius, quite possibly. And then the next film is another Will Ferrell film that kind of figures right into that mode. And that is Everything Must Go. And this was my first time seeing Everything Must Go. And, it's based on a Raymond Carver story. And it's about an alcoholic salesman, kind of marketing guy, who is having a run of bad luck on a day, right? He loses his job right at the beginning of the film. And goes home to find all of his shit out on the lawn, and his wife is gone, and the locks are changed. And so he's not he's not doing well. And so he buys as much Pabst Blue Ribbon as he can, and he gets as drunk as he can for as long as he can. And there's one thing I really didn't like about the film, right? There's a plot twist at the end that I just didn't believe at all. I just didn't buy it for a second. But the two things the movie does just so well, I think, is that it gets the culture of sales exactly right? All the verbiage, all the jargon, the philosophy, like it really understands the culture of sales. And it understands and exposes, I suppose is even a better way to put it, the weaknesses in that culture, right? It's so much about kind of manufactured relationships that it somehow kind of elbows out actual relationships or the possibility of actual relationships, and which is something that salespeople really have to be careful of. I work in sales, and to say that I approach sales differently from how most managers or writers of business books, et cetera, would have me approach sales is an understatement. So it gets sales right. And the other thing that I really, really love about this film is that he has a new neighbor across the street, played by Rebecca Hall, who's an actress that I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan of all the time. And she is pregnant, and she is just moving in, and she's waiting for her husband, right? Her husband's still back on the East Coast. And Will Ferrell and the character of this neighbor, played by Rebecca Hall, they begin to kind of become friends. And the movie doesn't take the route of trying to kind of impose a romance on them, which is really to its credit. And what I love about the relationship, platonic relationship between these characters in the film, is that these are two damaged people who are seeing or who have seen their closest relationships fall apart, or they're in the process of falling apart, and so, but they still need someone, right? Like they still need friends, they still need closeness and intimacy in their lives, and so here we have these two characters who are kind of dancing around getting to know each other, and they're so cautious and they're so wary, but they need that connection, but they're distrustful of what what kind of intimacy they are finding as possible friends, because their connections with these other people around them have eroded so badly, or have imploded even, that they're not quite sure how to do it, right? They need this. They need to reach out and make friends with one another, but they don't know how to do it. They have lost their knack for how to do it. And in Will Ferrell's case, it has a lot to do with the fact that he has spent 16 years as a salesman, following the models that salesmen are supposed to follow, and manufacturing relationships, and so he doesn't know how to kind of let his guard down and be real with someone anymore, and watching them try to do that was really beautiful. That was my favorite thing, I think, about the film. Everything Must Go. So yeah, the highlights were two Will Ferrell movies, I suppose one could say. And then the film that I watched last night, which I had mentioned in my tag video earlier in the week, was Beginning. It's a Georgian film, Georgia the country, not the state, directed by D. Kulumbegashvili, and I was so excited to see this movie. And I tell you what, it has one of the best beginnings I've ever seen in a film. It was so mesmerizing and so alarming. I haven't seen a movie in a long time that made my pulse race like the beginning of this film did. It was just remarkably good, and the film was really strong throughout, and was doing seemed to be doing or exploring some really interesting ideas. It's about a kind of sect of Jehovah's Witnesses in in this town where they're just not terribly welcome. There's so much that the film has to say about the dynamics of a marriage, right? And how men can fail their wives, and how for wives, being emotionally guarded is a survival, or can be a survival mechanism. The film is, like I said, it starts just exceptionally well, and it's really, really strong throughout most of it. But in the last 25 minutes or so, with the exception of a really beautiful scene of baptisms in that stretch of time, the movie just starts coming off the rails. The director, has it begins to feel like if she knew what she wanted to say with the film, it seems by the end that she no longer knew how to say what she wanted to say. And the ending of the film, the last two scenes in the movie, one is just, I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe that it would happen. A, B, the response of one of the characters in the film. So the behavior of the characters in that scene, just, it made no sense at all. Not a lick of sense. It was completely antithetical to how human beings are and think and respond and react to things. And it didn't make any sense. And then the finale of the film, the final scene, was just pretentious as all shit, man. I have no idea what it's supposed to mean. It was beautiful to look at. It implied a cool special effect, but yeah, I mean, whatever it's supposed to mean, that's a pretentious filmmaker, saying essentially, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and it's your job to try to understand it. And that's not what filmmaking should be. I have an expression I like to use, particularly with filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and David Lynch, both of whom have made films that I really like, but the films of theirs I dislike because the filmmaker has kind of crawled up his own ass, right? And has forgotten about his audience, and he's just interested in doing what he wants to do, audience be damned, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's something to be said for that. I love when directors have a vision and they commit to that vision, but they're not making the movies just for themselves. The movies are being made for an audience. And, you need to respect the intelligence of the audience. You need to not pander to the audience. But you also need to not go out of your way to confuse the audience, right? To pull the rug out from under the narrative that you spent the last 2 hours giving people, and then end it with something that just, I can imagine people laughing at the end of this and just walking out saying, "What the fuck was that?" And that's not what a movie should do. So, anyway, those are the films that I watched this week. I didn't get much crocheting done. I'm sorry, Blue. I'll sit here, put the cameras off, and do a little bit more crocheting. But those were the films I watched this week. Those are my reading plans. It's my reading kind of blueprint or outline for the rest of the year, and then the Western Wind. So I look forward to really seeing where that book goes, and to see if the stars of it begin aligning more than they are at this point, because I really do want to like it. The prose is beautiful. There are just wonderful observations at times, and it's also just a really a rather smart book on the subject of religion. There's a great conversation in the book between the dean and the priest about the nature of purgatory, and I thought that was just wonderful. That was probably my favorite part in the book so far, actually. But her descriptions of the natural world, though, are just really just lovely as well. It's just this problem I'm having with the characters, right? If you're going to tell the story in reverse, and a perfect example of how to do that incredibly well is Sarah Waters' novel, The Night Watch. If a novelist is going to do that, they need to read that book first to understand why, if you're going to do that, there needs to be a damn good reason that you're doing that, right? It needs to, I don't know, like the decision needs to figure into, it needs to play into or play up the possibility of revelation in the story, of epiphany, of surprise, and this novel isn't doing that at all for me yet. It's beautifully told, but I'm just getting no real sense of the characters yet, apart from the priest, who's the narrator, and I have yet to understand why telling the story in reverse was the right way to tell the story, or the best way to tell the story. So hopefully by the end of the book, it will become clear to me, and I will appreciate it a good deal more than I have been to this point. So anyhow, my friends, that's it for now, and I will talk to you guys again very soon. Adios.